everyone, and welcome back to another industry report. So, the tech industry's two Tims are at war as Tim Sweeney's Epic Games takes on Tim Cook's Apple over the idea of the App Store monopoly. Now, Sweeney has been very vocal in his criticisms of Apple's revenue share in the past, and this week Epic took, some very, very bold steps in escalating this conflict, stuff that I would say is almost unprecedented in how aggro it is, in that Epic basically just kind of forced Apple to... Basically, Epic broke the rules on purpose so that Apple and Google would act how they would have to based on their rules, so that Epic could then bring a bunch of suits against them, antitrust stuff. Which is super interesting to have going on in the industry. And even if you're not somebody who's interested in Fortnite, I know I'm not particularly interested in Fortnite, this is something that is absolutely massive in what it means. This is one of the largest stories, I would say, of this year in terms of stuff that, actually matters for the systems that drive the industry. So yes, what they did is they attempted to make a direct payment system in Fortnite that would have, of course, circumnavigated Apple's in-app purchase system, which meant that, Apple wouldn't have got the 30%, and that was against their rules. Apple, of course, and then later Google, reacted as you may expect. They wiped Fortnite from their app stores and widely condemned Epic's actions. But... well, Epic are not rolling over. They have actually issued formal legal complaints. They've already been submitted against both Apple and Google. So this fight really is ramping up, and what we're going to do today is work out what the hell is going on and what it actually means. Of course, we're trying to get to 250k. Most of the people who watch this channel are not subscribed to the channel, so you can fix that problem by hitting that sub button. And yeah, we do daily game industry news. Essentially, that's what goes on here. So if you want more of that, that's the thing to do. And with that said, let's get into the story. So things kicked off earlier this week with what Epic called the Fortnite Mega Drop, which is a permanent up to 20% discount for V-Bucks, the in-game premium currency. Now, while the new prices are also available on consoles, Epic's move was very much a deliberate shot against Apple and Google. Consoles just got the newly reduced prices automatically, so over there the players don't need to do anything. But on mobile devices, it was a lot more spicy because players would actually have to choose between the newly implemented Epic Direct payment option or the regular App Store one. And you'd need to do Epic Direct in order to get the reduced prices. Why was that? Well, it's because Epic Direct would be cutting out the middleman, so that would be Google or Apple, and it would just be the payment done directly via Epic. No 30% fee, and those cost savings were passed on from, basically Epic actually passed the savings on, which is pretty good for customers because it would, of course, be a more efficient market when less money is going to a middleman. But of course, this is a move that is not good for Apple's bottom line, and it's also one that is an open violation of Apple's terms of service, which do explicitly state that apps may not use their own mechanisms to unlock content or functionalities. Now, Epic are fed up, though, and with the FAQs for the Mega Drop, they really did read like a call to action, highlighting that thousands of Apple-approved apps on the App Store, such as, Amazon, Uber, McDonald's, and all of those, actually do get to do direct payments, and that Epic believe that, quote, all developers should be free to support direct payments in all apps. Which, you really would hope so, but of course for video games on the App Store, not really the case. Or at least right now, of course. Now, there's undoubtedly a huge amount of money at stake here for Epic in their war against these revenue cuts. $1.2 billion according to Sensor Tower as an example. But by making a stand against this in a way that genuinely does benefit players because it cuts out a middleman and passes the cost savings on, Epic are basically looking to leverage their humongous player base, and they really have with their kind of marketing campaign around this, to make a point. And of course, you then have to remember that this all happened pretty shortly after, of course, Tim Cook of Apple, Sundar Pichai of Google were at, basically it was kind of like it was like a big hearing in America where sort of the tech leaders, it was kind of like antitrust stuff. So this really is coming hot off the heels of that, and I think that is something that is very much Epic seeing the ongoing discussion and how a lot of the powers that be are not particularly pleased with these companies, and then it's Epic trying to sort of slip in there, become a part of that narrative, and, of course, advocate for what they want. So, let's talk about the Apple ban. It was swift and entirely unsurprising. They wiped Fortnite off the App Store. Now, the official reason was that Epic intentionally violated App Store guidelines that are applied equally to every developer and are designed to keep the store safe for our users, so they say. And in a way, yes, locking down the payment mechanisms does, I guess, help security, and that it's only going through Apple, but of course, Apple's 30%, I think that really is a lot more than payment processing. It's also Apple saying, we're providing you with this platform, we are going to skim something off the top because we've created the economic machine upon which your business exists, because they make the phones, and Fortnite goes onto the phones. You could argue that if, the modern smartphone stuff was not where it was, then Fortnite Mobile would be less of a thing. So that would be sort of, I think, Apple's internal justification for why they are charging that fee. I mean, the same goes for the 70-30 split on like an Xbox or a PS4. So there's that. Now, Apple, of course, did say that they are trying to work with Epic to resolve the violation, so I would imagine remove Epic Direct Pay. Now, while some observers were unconvinced that Apple would ban such a high-profile game outright, allowing Fortnite to stay on the App Store after Epic's flagrant violation of store policy, and it was that would have opened the floodgates for other developers to introduce their own direct payment schemes. And for Apple, that would be very bad, because what if suddenly the 30% of every Candy Crush in-app purchase that they currently get went away? What would that be like for Apple's bottom line? I'll tell you the answer. Not particularly good. So, yes, this means that Fortnite is no longer downloadable on iOS, but if you already had it on your iOS device, then it's not like it's been deleted. You can still also buy V-Bucks, either using the standard method or the new direct payment method. So, yes, Apple can still indeed earn money from Fortnite even while it's banned, but of course, new people can't pick it up on the App Store because it's been wiped from the App Store and it's not going to be receiving updates. Now, Epic did release a statement that condemned Apple's unwillingness to tolerate this healthy competition. That's their words, not mine. And they elaborated that while Fortnite is still playable on iOS, players won't have access to any new seasonal content, of course, because they're not going to be getting updates to the app because the app itself has been banned. So, this then, of course, led to the lawsuit. And Epic obviously expected this reaction, right? They put in Epic Direct Pay so they could get banned. I think anybody who thinks that Epic were surprised that they were banned, anybody who thinks that, I think, is just in fantasy land. I think it is so completely obvious that Epic's entire plan was to be banned from the store because, that's exactly what they would want, to push what they want to push. And they even made an ad campaign, essentially, surrounding that. So they knew they would get banned. So anyway, they would have had the lead time to do the 1984 advert, parody that they did about this. So this is all part of Epic's plan, to be super clear. So yes, they obviously expected this, and they filed a lawsuit against Apple shortly after Fortnite was removed. Now, this complaint seeks to establish Apple's App Store as a monopoly, and it requests that the court issue an injunction to prevent Apple from continuing their anti-competitive policies, according to the suit. Now, it emphasizes that Epic are not seeking monetary compensation or seeking any sort of favorable treatment for themselves as a single company, but what they want is fair competition for consumers and developers alike. And it is the situation that, yes, when the App Store is locked down to that degree, it is not necessarily fair. And there's a I'll get into the interesting bit, because Epic tried to characterize Apple's 30%, basically 30% cut on in-app purchases. They tried to frame that as basically a payment processing fee, which it really isn't a payment processing fee. It's a lot more than that, but it's pretty obvious why Epic would want to characterize that as a payment processing fee when, most other payment processing fees, instead of 30%, are more like 3%. Now, this takes us to 1984, so another piece of evidence that Epic effectively baited Apple into this ban was the video that they aired inside Fortnite. It is called 1980 Fortnite, and it is a short that, of course, is referencing George Orwell's 1984, which is, of course, when a totalitarian regime enforces, absolute conformity amongst the population. But what really matters here is that Epic's video is actually a parody of the Ridley Scott-directed 1984 Apple Computers advert, which basically portrayed a fledgling Apple as smashing through IBM, and going through IBM's sort of monopolistic domination of the industry, and that Apple was kind of there as this sort of bright hope for the future. future. The bicycle of the mind and all of that. Now, Epic's video recasts themselves in the underdog role as they attempt to overturn Apple's oppressive monopoly. So yes, it is quite something. The video ends with Fortnite's Bright Bomber rescuing the brainwashed masses by hurling a hammer through a giant screen featuring a talking apple with a bite taken out of it. So yes, just like the Ridley Scott advert. Now it ends with the message that says, Epic Games have defied the App Store monopoly. In retaliation, Apple is blocking Fortnite from 1 billion devices. Join the fight to stop 2020 becoming 1984. #free Fortnite. And then, of course, Google as well, because Google, they did take a little bit longer, but they did also boot Fortnite off the Play Store. Now, Google's terms and conditions are a bit more lax than Apple's, but they clearly do state that developers must use Google Play in-app billing for payments when they're offering content for sale within an app. And some of the other problems that they had there is basically they tried to go on like OnePlus phones and a bunch of other manufacturers' phones, but basically Google's agreements kind of prevented them from doing that with those phones, though I do believe that on Samsung devices, you can get like Fortnite through the Samsung store, and on that, you are allowed to use Epic Direct Pay and get the 20% off the V-Bucks that we also dearly want. Totally. But yeah, so basically Google reached the same conclusion that Epic had violated their policies, which they absolutely did. They did on purpose. It's the entire bloody point. They did it to make a point so they could file these suits. Let's talk about the Google lawsuit. So, yes, they also filed a lawsuit against Google, and while their suit against Apple opened with a description of Apple's 1984 advert, Epic's suit against Google opens, well, with the company's now, I think, infamous "Don't be evil" mantra, and how it has been relegated to being nearly an afterthought. And by the way, it's actually no longer, I think it's no longer the company mantra, and in 2018, I believe, "Don't be evil" actually disappeared off Google's code of conduct. Very cool. So, like Apple, Epic are arguing that Google are using their size to monopolize markets and to influence freedom. And that basically a lot of the situation here is that there's actually multiple elements to the App Store business, because there's the App Store on iOS, but then there is the App Store, how they characterize it, the App Store's payment processing, which is Apple's 30% fee, and that it's monopolistic to have the App Store that you basically need to get in that device, but then to limit your payment processors to only the one that you own, because then that is literally anti-competitive, because you can't use PayPal if you're paying for an in-app purchase in a video game in iOS or Google Play. You've got to use like the Play Store or the App Store's built-in payment system, which then of course does have that 30% in-app purchase fee. And look, I should be clear, this is something that's like, it's not even just in video games. Like, there's a reason why, I don't know if I think it still is the case now, but like the Kindle app on iPhones or whatever, you cannot purchase books on the app. You have to purchase them on Amazon off your phone, or well, on your phone's browser. You have to do it there, and then the app just acts as a reader, because if they try to sell you, basically the way it would be is if they tried to sell you like your Kindle book on the Kindle store, then Apple would want 30% for that if it was on the app. So that's kind of what's going on there. But yes, Epic are not happy at Apple. Most of their ire has been directed at Apple, but of course lots of ire at Google as well. Now it's weird there, because Fortnite only became available on the Google Play Store in April of this year. Epic actually operated it independently for 18 months before coming to the, quote, basic realization that puts independently operated software at a disadvantage on that platform. And if you're not aware, if you try to install the non-Play Store version of Fortnite, there's just a whole bunch of security pop-ups and stuff, and, it's not an ideal experience. So, let's talk about the direction of these lawsuits. Epic's two suits against Apple and Google are largely identical. They condemn the large corporations using their size to monopolize their platforms and require developers to jump through unnecessary hoops, and the tying in of them owning the store and the platform and forcing you to use a single payment processor. It argues that Apple and Google have basically ensured that the only way to survive on their platforms is to use their services and pay their fees, where what Epic want is a more open open and competitive environment that is more fair for consumers and developers alike. Now, Epic are actually casting themselves in a pretty noble light here. They are doubling down hard on the idea that Apple and Google are pretty tyrannical and that Epic are simply just out for justice. But of course, crucially, they do also suggest that they would like to set up their own competing app store if the landscape permitted it. So yes, they're probably trying to carve out some sort of Epic app store on mobile platforms as well, which would make, a decent bit of sense. And it's totally in their shtick. Look what they did in PC. Now, the main thing here is antitrust. And okay, I'm not going to go and give a full explainer of the Sherman Antitrust Act, but there's many YouTube channels that have done that, talking about the likes of Standard Oil and I think the railroads as well, and just stuff from America's past. But it is really important legislation, and it matters a lot because these are all American companies. So yeah, if you're in Sweden or Ireland or the UK or whatever, it's going to affect you. Now, it will be interesting to see how this pans out. One of Epic's allegations is that the anti-competitive conduct of Apple and Google has harmed Epic, quote, in a manner that antitrust laws were intended to prevent. And in many ways, they do have a pretty solid point here. If you look back at, say, United States versus Microsoft Corporation, that's an antitrust case from 2001, and that was in which the US government formally accused Microsoft of maintaining an illegal monopoly position based on how difficult it was for users to install alternative internet browsers on their computers, and of course how Microsoft Internet Explorer came on the computers by default. So it was basically Microsoft leveraging their dominant position in one side of the market to kind of monopolize the other one, right? And try to, just get that with the internet browsers. And allegedly also part of that was that Microsoft had knowingly manipulated programming interfaces to favor Internet Explorer over third-party browsers. And in that case, the judge later ruled that Microsoft's dominance did indeed constitute a monopoly that was in violation of the 1890 Sherman Antitrust Act. And certainly if you look at, say, Microsoft's humongous fees in the EU, that's another example of antitrust, anti-competitive, stuff going on. Now, Epic they really could make quite a racket here, and if they are successful, it would set a hell of a precedent going on. What that would do for apps would be wild. I imagine that the actual store fees, here's what I think, right? The actual store fees of you just selling your app 70-30 on the App Store, I don't think that's ever going to be at risk. But I think it's the payment processing side of the 30% that is taken for in-app purchases. I think that's the thing that they really could be trying to change up here. That, and also things like trying to get it so that Apple would be forced to allow another app store in their device. I'm not necessarily saying they definitely want that to happen, but just the way that this could all be going, is certainly interesting. If you've got these two different cases going on, and a bunch of things are made for Android, a bunch of decisions are made about how things should be going down in the Android operating system, that's kind of interesting because Android is a lot more open in what you can do. So you then wonder if there's decisions being made for Android, would they want parity with over an iOS? I don't really know. I'm not a legal person, but it's just an interesting bit of food for thought, I suppose. But really, for the whole hashtag free Fortnite, this is Epic throwing their weight around, and they're using emotionally charged terminology. They're doing that to rile up their player base in a show of strength against both Apple and Google. This is one of the most aggressive moves we have seen in a very long time. Baiting a company into deleting wiping your game, your biggest thing, off their store so that you can then unleash a anti-that company marketing campaign and lawsuit. That's a that's a big ball move. That's quite something. And it's obviously created an us versus them dynamic that is both Epic versus Apple, Epic versus Google, but also Epic's audience and the common person, the average indie developer versus Apple and versus Google. And I think they're doing it very effectively. Now, it's interesting that they're not going after consoles in the same way, where there's revenue cuts there. Sort of hard to know what's going on there exactly, but at least for right now, the focus really is on the Xbox Store and on the Google Play Store. And it could be that that's quite targeted because Apple have received a lot of criticism from developers lately. There was the whole email application thing that was, I believe, brought up in the recent hearing. So it's kind of slotting into this unfolding narrative of big tech in America, and I think they're doing that in a very knowing way. So that really is it for this story right now. As for where this could go, I have absolutely no idea. If a judge ruled in favor of Epic Epic in these cases. It truly would change the way that things are done. And I mean, if you think about the amount of money that 30% fee makes for in-app purchases, because, you know, most apps are free with in-app purchases. That's just how they work. I mean, if you think about what that going away or being forced to change would actually do, that really is something. And really, if Epic are able... So here's the thing, right? Is the 30% App Store fee strictly a payment processing fee? Well, I believe that, you know, technically it might be or whatever, but I think the point there is a lot more that you are putting your game on our platform. We've created this platform, we've created the hardware that runs this platform, in the case of Apple anyway, and yeah, you're going to be taxed 30% because we have created this thing and you are doing business atop this thing that we have created. Therefore, we have helped create this business for you and we think we deserve a cut of your in-app purchases. I think that's the more biz logic that's going on there. But the thing is that if Epic are able to actually reframe that, as they try to in their suits, as strictly a exorbitant 30% payment processing fee that is much larger than, you know, the 3%-ish of other processors, they can do that, and they can actually get the judge and like the legal system to agree with that, then certainly we could be in a very interesting situation. Because overall, what does that 30% do? Well, what it does is it massively decreases the efficiency of developing applications, because the profitability of your business is just decreased by, you know, whatever you're losing to the increased tax, versus if you just, you know, sold your in-app purchases via PayPal. Now, what that means is the developers make less money, and a lot of people will do that and think, oh, game developers, game publishers, they don't need more money, they're fine. Well, actually, no, not really. I mean, if you've got a team of 10 people, and you're a small-ish company and you're trying to self-fund things, yeah, you can be pretty damn sure that, say, getting, you know, 20% better margin because this store fee doesn't exist, you can be pretty darn sure that's going to really matter and really be impactful. So the current status quo of high fees basically sucks for things being made. And the thing is, it's the type of thing where consumers never see the downside of that, right? Because the only things you see are the things that survived. But how many niches and smaller products and things like that, you know, could have found a little bit more success if the fundamentals upon which they were doing business were a little bit more efficient? And in this case, yeah, if you could just get like a 3% payment processing fee instead of a 30% one in terms of those cuts, it would certainly make a lot more sense. If you make 50,000 sales of your game on the Epic Game Store with its 8812 versus on Steam with its 7030 at around that sort of volume of units, yeah, you're going to get a lot more in your pocket at the end for if you're on Epic. And ultimately, that is the good thing that Epic are doing. They are trying. They obviously benefit from it, but at the same stage or at the same point, yeah, 8812 is just better for developers. And if it's better for your average developer, it's probably better for your average customer, because it makes the development, like, it makes game development more efficient, more financially efficient. That means it makes more things more financially viable. And that ultimately should be good for consumers. And that's really what competition is supposed to do. It's supposed to drive those fees down, make the market, you know, more competitive, drive more innovation. And ultimately, things like this are not necessarily good for that. So it's an interesting situation, one that we really will just have to wait and see. It could be insane whatever happens through this. So yeah, I'll research a whole bunch of it. I'll let you know what's going on. But for now, that's it for me. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.